All right, welcome. Thank you very much. As Ken mentioned, we are going to be talking about material supply side risk and how we can moderate that. We've all had the fortune over the last 2.5 years of living through a lifetime's opportunity of growth and disruption. When you look at COVID-19, labor shortages, demand shocks, supply side shocks, inflation, lead times, stimulus, that's more change than most people get in their career, and we got it all in 2.5 years. And in the post-pandemic world, agencies need to ensure that infrastructure is more resilient. You've heard a lot of that this morning, and that their supply chains are reliable and that we eliminate risk. Engineers, project managers, contractors, city officials all face these challenges as they try to deliver a completed project in an efficient and effective manner. Just hoping that things are going to return to pre-pandemic conditions is probably quite unrealistic. Our society has gone through a lot of change, and it's impacting the way that we work today and the way that we work in the future. And so new strategies and opportunities exist to disrupt the traditional ways with which we do business if you choose to accept those. Today, we have a panel of experts that are going to share with us some new ideas and strategies that they've been employing to navigate this. My name is Brian King. I work for Advanced Drainage Systems, or ADS. We are the largest corrugated pipe manufacturer in the US. We also sell stormwater systems. If you need to capture a raindrop in some type of basin, take it or convey it, either away from where you don't want it or to where you do want it through plastic pipes, we have those. We also have storage systems where we can retain and detain that product or water and get it back into the environment. And then we have some products as well too that make sure that we treat that water and return it to the environment in a better condition in which it entered that stormwater solution. I could talk about pipe all day. You probably don't want to hear that. And so we will now have a quick introduction of our panel. I grew up in Canada, so I'm probably the farthest away from Miami in the room. So I'm probably going to totally ruin this, but Andrea told me to roll my R's. So it's Andrea Suarez Abastida. She's the director, MMB Water, City of North Miami Beach. We have Deborah London, project manager, Monroe County, Florida. Vijay Mishra, lead project manager for the South Florida Water Management District. And Eric Gonzalez, who's the VP of Construction Operations at CES Construction, LLC. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the only question I'm going to ask each of you, but it's a really quick one. I'm going to start with, who am I going to start with? I will start with, well, Vijay, you're closest, so we'll do that. Over the last 2.5 years, there's been many changes in the way that we've conducted and continue to conduct work. What is the one thing that you think has had the biggest impact on how you do your job?
All right. So in last 2.5 years, obviously COVID has done what it has done. I think the biggest thing which I can think of is the impact it has had on the human life. So one of the projects here in Miami that I have been managing for almost 2 years, we had significant losses in terms of the people in the beginning phases, and then everything else that came after that. So labor shortage or the material supply or whatever you think, everything has gone into it. So what we have learned is that we need to be humble. We cannot be overconfident of what we can do. I always, whenever I'm talking to somebody who's younger than me, and I say, if you are an engineer, if you have a problem, give me just time and money, and I will find the solution for you. But when these kind of things come in and you are like completely clueless, what should you do? So I think this is what that last 2.5 years has probably taught me, is the being humble with what you can and what you cannot do.
Awesome. Definitely being humble, because we don't know the answers to all the challenges we face. Andrea, same question.
So for me, it has been, I recently changed from the private sector to the public sector. It's completely different. So, you have to adjust your mindset because you're ready, you go. But sometimes in the public sector, you have to stop and readjust. And it's been also challenging. We are the second largest water utility in the county. We recently went from a transition it went to a private company and then back to the city in February of 2021. So trying to build the team back, equipment back during the pandemic has been challenging. So, I used to do change management before as well. So some of those things is, you sometimes have to adjust your sail as to where the wind is blowing.
Absolutely. Change management has been something we've all been dealing with. Deborah?
I would say workload has definitely increased. We're a small county government, your friends to the south. And, we honestly have to do a lot of jobs that in larger county governments, are spread out among several people. So, I, as a project manager, I do procurement, I do grants, I do public outreach, so that's tough. I think the workload has definitely increased, but in a good way, I think, we're learning a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, Eric.
So I think over the last several years, probably something that everybody's run into is managing price escalation and labor shortages and trying to have open communication with an owner or a client and being able to say, it's not price gouging. It's not, not wanting to build a job or complete a job or things of that nature. Most of it, when it comes to, especially, when we work a lot in design build, is managing a client's expectations when it comes to initial conceptual pricing, and then moving to a year down the line when a project is being built to everybody here knows what pricing is 12 months later, over the last 2 or 3 years. So being able to have that open communication and building the level of trust with an owner so that they understand that when you're being honest with them and transparent, that it's like, everybody is running into that same issue.
Thank you very much. Definitely heard some themes through there around, labor, availability of products, ability to change with what's going on. So my first question is going to be for Andrea, and it's while you don't have strict deadlines with all your projects, certain sources of funding are time dependent. So how do you manage all those things you're working around about material availability, labor? How do you manage that to ensure that your project remains funded?
So it's important open communication with regulatory agencies. So we work with EPA for WIFIA loans. We have a WIFIA loan. We work with the Department of Economic Opportunity as well. So we maintain that communication with them. We've had to adjust and request waivers for American build, items that we are not able to get. So far, we have been able to communicate with them. We've also made adjustments on our delivery methods. So going more on the design build part of it, see what's available, so talk to the contractors and see design build, progressive design build. What is the material that is available at that time, and allowing for those alternatives during our specs to be able to get those materials. We've been thinking about doing some pre-purchasing as well to be able to provide. Not everybody likes doing that, but those are the items that we're looking at, and just open communication with the agencies that we work with.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw the next question over to Eric, because definitely you work with those agencies. So can you comment about those different types of bidding practices that are being used? Open competition, alternative delivery, pre-purchase of materials we heard. What are you doing to ensure that balance of cost, performance, and timing keeps projects on budget?
Yeah, I feel like everything that Andrea was just saying is something that I would say to the exact same question. Everybody here is familiar with design bid build, low bid contracting, but specifically, Andrea was just talking about design build, progressive design build. I think one of the areas that we have shifted into is more into design build, and specifically progressive design build. Why? Again, Andrea mentioned it, being able to pre-purchase, being able to plan. There's a project that we're currently working on, we just submitted 90% design on, where we were actually able to advance supply chain procurement of materials by 10 months. That we were able to make sure that we had materials in hand 10 months early. So that in this, over the last 2 or 3 years, that's unheard of. And why? Because again, we've been able to get ahead of, during the design phase, get ahead of what materials are needed, properly communicate with our client, work with them to be able to procure the materials, speak with our distribution partners, our manufacturing partners, and then make sure that the project is not only purchased at the correct price, it's purchased on time so that when construction does start, we can get ahead of it. And moving into the progressive design build space has really helped us to do that and really stay ahead of the curve when it comes to supply chain issues.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to throw this to Deborah because supply chain issues involve labor. And you live in an area of South Florida where the cost of living could prevent or limit skilled labor from being available to you. How are you addressing that challenge around labor?
Well, in Monroe County, we have employee housing initiative where the county is actually providing housing for employees. It's just starting. It's a new initiative. We have an affordable housing requirement of developers where a certain portion of their development has to be affordable housing. But I will say there's a disconnect between the HUD equation of household income and what somebody has to pay for rent, because quite frankly, in Monroe County, affordable housing is $2,500 a month. So that's not for, the construction team, working team. The other thing I would say is Davis-Bacon wage rates need to be realistic. Those need to be looked at because they are just really not realistic. Luckily, our contractors pay way over that, but that's an area that needs to be looked at. So, we're trying the best we can. One thing that's innovative is that there is an air conditioning contractor who's actually providing housing for his employees. So, that's thinking outside the box, do what you got to do to make sure you can keep a workforce in Monroe County. It's tough. It's tough because, it's an extremely expensive place to live. And it is a challenge for us. And a lot of our workforce comes down from Dade County and commutes back and forth. And unfortunately, we don't have a train in Monroe.
I mean, definitely.
That didn't work out too good.
Definitely labor availability and access to labor is something I think everybody struggles with in every profession, or it's something that doesn't seem to be going away, right? And as my CEO likes to tell me, right, more labor is not going to solve the labor problem. We have to figure out how to be more innovative and make sure that we have more productive labor in the workforce. So doing different things like that seems to be very innovative. Vijay, the water district that you manage, which I believe is the largest in the world, is what you told me, which is pretty amazing. You do both maintenance and capital improvement projects. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between managing a capital improvement project where you have a timetable and a maintenance project which might show up on a Tuesday and you have to fix it? How do you manage the difference between those sort of emergency jobs and your capital improvement projects?
So let's start from the funding point of view, how district is structured. So most of our major projects, we basically environmental restoration projects, funding for those kind of projects and the resources for those kind of projects basically comes from the state appropriation. When we have been lucky that for last few years, we have a champion in the Tallahassee who has been rooting for our projects. We have been getting significant amount of funding, and we have been working on major projects. In last 4 years, we have done almost 55 major projects. Either we have kicked off, we have completed, or we have reached a major milestone in the last 4 years. So we have been very fortunate in that extent. And the way it helps us is that it helps us in a way that it provides us the necessary funding resources needed for those kind of projects. When it comes to O&M, we also have the ad valorem dollars. Those are the dollars that we obviously get from the property taxes, which you all pay. So yes, those have been going up, but the inflationary pressure on that ad valorem dollar has also been pushing it down. So just to give a very simple example here in Miami-Dade County, we have a project going on. We are building a wall in just west of here. We were able to do almost a mile of a wall. This is a wall that is in the ground, almost 60 feet deep. We were able to do a mile of a wall for a $5 million. That was before COVID. During COVID, right now, for the same wall, same depths, everything same, we are paying $8 million. It's a major escalation, and then we have to figure those kind of dollars, like where are we getting? Now for the emergency, we are, just to get a sense of like if there is an emergency, district currently has over 4,500 miles of levees and canal, over 1,500 structures, almost 100 pump stations, and this is all managed by almost 1,400 staff. So we are very, I should say, we are very focused on what we do. And anytime a problem comes up, everyone from the top of the management to the bottom of the staff level, we all jump on it. And we are very fortunate that we have the kind of management who understand the needs of us as a staff and provide the resources we need. So that has, yes, we all are facing the same challenges of materials and the human resource and everything else, but we have been fortunate that we have been able to keep up with that. We haven't shut down a single job in the district during the whole time. We have been working through, and we have been meeting those major milestones. So it's just a matter of putting an effort on those things.
Definitely prioritizing resources is key. I'm going to pick up on a comment you made there around inflation, and I'm going to throw this to Eric, is how are you selecting materials and products? I mean, you mentioned the difference between we do a bid and it's set for 12 months later, and then you have to manage that. How are you selecting materials with supply chain challenges, with availability issues, with all those different selection criteria? What are you guys doing to address that?
So, I think we're fortunate here in Florida that we have the FDOT. The FDOT is a body that has a lot of power to a lot of funding to test materials, to write specifications, to set standards. And so a lot of times, as you know, for us as an engineering-led construction company, it makes it very easy for us to understand standards, make sure that the testing there has been completed, especially at the local level. So a lot of times when we're working for a municipality, we can evaluate standards, and then we can also use FDOT as backup standards to be able to say, well, in the event that you have a material that that you're specifying that is either unavailable or the price is escalated, we have specifications that we can fall back on. FDOT does a really great job of testing the materials out of Gainesville, and then having a full set of comprehensive standards and engineers on staff to be able to back those up. And then also, again, having the ability to have open communications with our owners and say, what are the actual needs? What are you trying to accomplish within your municipality, so that as engineers, we can evaluate the need, go back to our specifications, and try to either work with the products that are currently specified or suggest products that are proven in the industry to work.
Awesome. So, Andrea, you talked a little bit about supply chain issues. Eric mentioned, some of the things they're doing. So talk to me a little bit about in your agency when you need to make that switch, or you're changing from something that's proven and known to something that's unknown. How do you manage that? How do you manage that change management in your organization?
So for drinking water, it's very strict standards that we have. So a lot of the standards come from the American Water Works Association, and there's certain materials that they allow for that. So that's where we're working right now. So, you can get C900, or you can get DIP, or you can get HDPE. So we do have very specific ones that we can use, but that's what we are working with contractors and making sure that they do have that availability of picking from those specifics as to what is available. On the other hand, we do have, a warehouse where we can work with a warehouse manager on the supply also, and he can call some of the vendors that he knows and get some of the material that is available for that.
Definitely. Having that ability to be able to order and then keep the materials for when you need them definitely probably makes you a really, really attractive customer. And I think in this environment, sometimes being an attractive customer to a manufacturer certainly plays. Trust me, it does. I'm going to throw this to Deborah. We're talking about material change, and historically our industry has been really slow to change. So with the challenges that we've talked about and everything that we're facing, how do you adjust to that change? How do you better address that risk, and what are you guys doing, and what would you like to see us as an industry do?
Well, I think playing on what he said, obviously we want to use the FDOT APL list, approved products list. In Monroe County, I'm roads and bridges, so we don't try to reinvent the wheel. We go by what DOT standards are. That definitely simplifies things for us. There is a disconnect from what I find in civil engineering versus constructability. Typically, I'll have 20 RFIs during a construction project. I'm just throwing a number out there, but so that means that it's not designed to constructability. There's questions on the drawing. So I think the engineering community, could more use, working with contractors more closely in the design phase when they're designing something to make sure that it is constructible. Also, attention of engineers, design engineers during the estimating process to look at local conditions. That's extremely important. And I think somebody touched on, the federal, if you have things that are federally funded, you have to really look at BABA, Buy America, Build America. And I think sometimes design engineers are not that well familiar with federal grant requirements. In Monroe County, we use federal and state funding like crazy because we're a small community. We don't have the money. So it's really important that our designs meet federal guidelines. And so that's why we do partner pretty closely with FDOT standards and works out for us. So I parrot the idea that FDOT knows what they're doing. We like how they do business and we try to follow their guidelines.
Excellent. I mean, what I heard there was a lot of communication, right? And so if you try to develop a project in a vacuum, you potentially end up with issues which cause delay. Delay then causes cost. Cost then causes problems. So if we keep talking through the process, that definitely seems to be a good and a best practice. So Vijay, we've talked a lot about design build through this. Are you using design build and how has that changed pre versus post-COVID?
So historically, district doesn't do a lot of design build, and there is obviously history behind why we don't do it. But recently, we have actually started doing a lot of progressive design build, and it has been beneficial to us. But we use progressive design build for mostly non-traditional structures for districts. So if it's a pump station, levee, canals, culverts, and all those things, we stick to our design bid build. But when it comes to something like building an office building, field station, those kind of things, we have been using more of the progressive design build. And to be honest with you, during this COVID, it turned out that was very effective for us. It did us, like whenever we change something, if it's a design bid build project, it's very hard to change things during construction. It's easy to do whatever you need to do during the design. You can do a lot of things. But during construction, it's very hard. It takes time. It takes a lot more dollars. But whereas if it's a progressive design build, you can change a lot more things during construction also. So it's a progressive process. Obviously, you're going through the process. So that is one thing I would say that we have been starting to look at more progressive design build, obviously for more non-traditional district projects. But we are also working on one of our largest $300 million design build project north of Lake Okeechobee. That's a new kind of design build we are doing. It's in very, very early stage. We haven't done that yet. So we will see how that goes. And probably that may provide us a roadmap for how we do projects in the future.
Interesting. So as COVID forced you to think about doing things differently, and then positive response to doing things differently is like, we should maybe think about doing that in some other cases. Yes. That's a really good learning.
Yes.
Andrea, we've talked about it, and you said that you have the ability to keep things in a warehouse. And one of the solutions we talked about was using potentially materials you haven't used before, new materials. Obviously, they have to meet code, they have to meet spec. But what do you guys go through, and have you actually used things that you've never used in the past as a result of supply chain? Have you used something new?
Well, what we did in one of our progressive design build projects right now, so most of the time people don't think you just open your tap, water comes out, but it goes through a process. It goes through a treatment process, so it becomes what you guys can drink. And we have a water treatment plant that actually uses 3 types of technology: reverse osmosis, nanofiltration, and lime softening. Right now, our progressive design build project was supposed to be a part of just rehabilitating our lime softening system. We started looking at what other options we had, because some of the lime softening the equipment, is no longer available, is not a good technology. We're investing a lot in maintenance. So where progressive design build came a good point for us is bringing a new technology. We're looking at doing a soft pellet system. Hasn't been used too much in the US. It's very widely used in Europe. So we're, now working with the district here and trying to talk to them and show them, it's a lime softening system that it will work. So going through the pilot testing and making sure that it's going to work for us. And that's something that we needed to adjust. At the beginning, it was just rehabilitation. That's what we're going to do. No, a better investment is to go with a brand new technology.
And just a follow-up question on that, how are you balancing like the installed capital cost of that versus maintenance? Are you looking at the long-term cost of the product? Can you talk just a little bit about how you analyze that?
Yeah, so as an example, with the lime softening system that we have right now, we have two big clarifiers. The plant is old, is about 50 years old at this point. So when we were looking at rehabilitating the tanks, they were actually delaminating already. So it would be a big investment to rehabilitate and maybe have another 20 years out of it instead of building a brand new system that can probably last us for another 50 years. So we definitely have to look at the short term and long term and see where we can spend our money and get the best value out of it.
Awesome, thank you. Deborah, you mentioned that you're away from things. You're sort of down the bottom of the keys. How do you think about local products? I mean, that's not really an option for you being where you are. But I mean, how do you think about where you are, products being locally available, and how do you make those choices of what you use?
Well, I do roads and bridges, so that it really, our asphalt has to come from Dade County, and if I have a project in Key West right now, we have to truck asphalt, 140 miles. So it's tough. And, in tourist season, I mean, think about that when we have like any kind of problem or if Snake Creek Bridge is malfunctioning or something, we're in big trouble. So we are totally dependent on the mainland for everything in terms of products coming down to Monroe County. And that, we really can't locally, even our lime rock, we don't really have a lime rock quarry either. So everything has to come down from Dade, basically. So it's a problem for us. The supply chain is definitely a problem.
Definitely, and things we have to look at. I mean, I know there's obviously a push to use local materials from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. And when you're in certain locations, you do what you can, but you are landlocked or chosen by that geography. Eric, we've talked about a lot of change up here. You're the company that has to implement and actually deliver some of these things. How do you keep relevant? How does your staff, your crews, how do they keep relevant with best practices and continuous education?
So I think that we're in a unique situation because we're involved very early on in our project processes. So we are involved in the conceptual phases of projects implementation, of owners' ideas, all the way through the design, all of the phases of design, constructability reviews, design reviews, reviews by our clients. And then, we have to break ground. We get our NTP, we build. And for us, I think a lot of the learning process and staying up to date comes through osmosis and being involved in all the different phases. When you're involved in direct conversations with your owner about what the municipality specifically needs, what problems they're trying to solve, you are able to learn from their perspective, how they are serving their citizens, how they're serving their residents, taxpayers. Then when you're involved on the design side, you have to be aware of all the different materials, the specifications, the regulatory requirements at different levels. Could be federal, it could be state, could be local municipality, all of those regulations. Then construction-wise, when you do work in different areas, you start being able to tell your friend, this might sound funny, but having a drink at the bar, you might be able to tell your friends what the geotech report was on, in this city and how it differs to that county. And you just kind of know these things. So in addition to that, I would say that involvement in a lot of the, the different conferences and the different the different associations really helps with networking, because you end up making friends with people in the industry, and you say, hey, I have a question about X, or I know that you were working on Y, and you're able to really have those conversations. So I'd say, being able to expose yourself and having your staff expose yourself to so many different aspects of a civil project and being involved in the industry with our partners, right? It's really helpful to staying abreast of all of the new innovations that are coming out and the new methodologies.
Appreciate that, and awesome. That's why everybody's here, because we're all learning and sharing as we go. Vijay, you're planning some projects that I'm sure have a very long approval process based on just where you are, how you are, what you're doing. I'm imagining approvals is a big part of this. You start a project and you estimate that cost of that project. The approval process takes a long period of time. Pre-COVID wouldn't have mattered. Inflation was minimal, right? Now, inflation is a pretty big deal. How do you plan for that? What are you guys doing?
So, luckily, it's not that much of an approval process. As a state agency, we have a lot more control of the timeline of our projects. We work with our state partners, we work with our federal partners, and we have our own state authorities for doing the project. So that has not been a problem. But realistically, yes, when the projects are being developed from the nascent stage of just conceptual to the final, when you're going for procurement, there is a change. And just to give you an example, there is a project, a small STA research project that I started just before COVID. The value of that project was around $11 to $12 million. A year ago, back in May when I put it on the street, and I finally got the bid for that project, the value of that same project that was before COVID, 11 million, was $24 million.
Wow.
And it's same exact project, not much has changed. Yes, there is a design development process, so you have some few things details that you have added, but it hasn't been. So before COVID, these kind of things were not something that you sit and think about. Yes, you do know that during the design development, the cost will go up by 20, 30%, but now we're talking about the factor of 2 and 3 times. So the way we have been doing that management is by making sure we keep our the people who are responsible for the purse be aware of it. We are also working with our contractors. So when we hire these contractors, we try to get them to get all their major components. The biggest material for water source project, if you have done one of those, is nothing but dirt, and it's available, it's everywhere. So that is not what we worry too much about, and that's why that's not something. But when it comes to electrical, mechanical, SCADA, anything, cement, concrete, rebar, all those things need to be brought to the job site. So those are the things that is what adds cost to it. But even with that, just all that, almost, I would say 70% of the project is dirt, still the costs are going so much. So what we have been doing is, as I said, we have been scheduling, we have been working with our contractor to see, pre-purchase a lot of the things that we can purchase. And then also working with our CMS and EDC, the folks like Eric, they are actually working on one of our projects to make sure that they assist the contractors as much as they, because at the end of the day, a project is only successful if your contractor is successful. If your contractor fails, your project fails. So it's very important that you do whatever you do to make sure you help your contractor, you help your EDC, your CMS, whoever it needs to be, they succeed, because if they succeed, then only you succeed.
I think that's very important. It's so easy to point fingers, right? It's so easy to say this didn't happen because you didn't do whatever you do, but that doesn't make the project finish on time, and it certainly doesn't make the project finish anywhere in your budget. So making sure that you're working and communicating, and I think you've heard that as a theme as we've talked through this panel today. I'm looking at time. I got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask Andrea one more question. Your city's open 24/7, and you have to be able to respond to emergencies immediately. And we've talked about cost, and we've talked about product availability. How are you guys managing that? You said you buy some materials, but I mean, how do you know when something goes wrong and you need to respond now because someone can't drink? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so, aside from drinking, it's thinking about fires. We need to maintain water for fire flow. So recently there was a fire in Miami Gardens, and the fire department had to go there, and we have to make sure that our fire hydrants are working, that our pipes are working. So as an example, one of the things that we're doing, our fire hydrants have a very specific NMB color. And one of the things that we had to do is send us whatever you have in fire hydrants, and we'll color it. We'll put the color, we'll add it, we'll make sure, because we no longer have the luxury of just pick what we want. Obviously, it's been an education process with our inventory also, but that's another thing we're looking at. So before we could go down to, we have 2 items left in our inventory. Now we probably have to start ordering when we have 5 items left. So working through that because the lead times are getting longer. So prepare a warehouse to keep more things in-house and have more spare parts for emergency.
Definitely flexibility. I mean, on the manufacturing side of things, we know a lot about that as a manufacturer. It's like we're doing things now that we'd never done before because a customer needs it. And so if you're willing to pay, we're willing to deliver. And it sounds like you guys are, just give us a white one and we'll make it whatever color it needs to be.
And the other thing that we do, because the utility, we all connect with each other. So, when everybody talks about One Water and the county working, we are able to call other utilities to ask them if they have some pieces available, and we'll borrow from each other as well. So that has helped us a lot.
Awesome. Well, we're going to draw this to a close. We will be available afterwards if you want to come and ask questions of anybody on the panel. But I think what you've heard on here is that change is happening. Change is not going to go away. That the environment that we find ourselves in, labor is not going to become instantly available next week. Costs probably aren't going to go down anytime soon. And yet the demands for us to be able to get projects done and delivered on time continue. And so listening to the panel today, thank you very much for sharing the things that you're doing. And we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.